Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Nurturing a Positive Workforce Mentality for a Prosperous, Healthy Recovery. Limerick Chamber is delighted to collaborate with Collins McNicholas to deliver today's session. We'd like to warmly welcome today's speakers, Cathal Sheridan of Munster Rugby and Rory Walsh of Collins McNicholas. I'm sure today's session will provide us all with some helpful tips to incorporate into our teams and our daily lives. We'll host a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar, so please feel free to add any questions you have to the chat feature and also the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screens. We really hope you enjoyed today's session, and I will now hand you over to Rory Walsh, our MC for today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Caoimhe. So yeah, you're all very welcome, folks, today, and a big thanks to the Chamber and Caoimhe. We're always delighted to support these events. So I suppose, firstly, just to give you a little bit of an intro as to how we came to today, and then I will only give you 2 or 3 minutes, and then Cathal, the specialist, will take it away from there. So I suppose, firstly, for those of you who might be aware of Collins McNicholas, just tell you a small bit about ourselves. We're a national recruitment agency, headquartered in the Northwest with 6 offices nationwide, and we're based out in our Limerick office, based out in Castletroy. We have teams that look after everything, all talent solutions, really, from operators right through to CEOs. Our clients range from one-off, I suppose, SMEs right across the country, right through to the large volume multinational campaigns, such as the Edwards Life Sciences startup here in Limerick that we are very proud of and continue to work with. We have a strong track record for over 30 years this year, working with clients across traditional, permanent, temporary and specialist engineering contract solutions. We pride ourselves in solving difficult talent solutions, and I'm delighted to be a Deloitte Best Managed Company Platinum member this year. So just myself and any of the team, of course, would be delighted to have a chat with any upcoming events or upcoming talent questions that you might have, questions, queries, solutions. So feel free to reach out to our guys in our Limerick office. So that's enough about ourselves. I suppose down to today's business, and I suppose for myself, I'm genuinely excited about today's webinar. I suppose we had initial mails and chats with Caoimhe, and we spoke about, I suppose, the challenges that the members are having, the Limerick Chamber, and I suppose really from our point of view is how we could really add value, how we could support the members, how we can add a little bit of value from our side of things, or how we could support in finding a speaker to add some real value to the members. I suppose, needless to say, we've all had challenges since March, challenging times both on a personal and professional level. Many businesses have had temporary layoffs, permanent redundancies, reduced hours, and that's before everyone has navigated the remote working structures. Some have never done this before, which brings some practical challenges, as well as preparing ourselves for the psychological challenges of remote working isolation and managing teams from home remotely as well. I suppose we're not now looking backwards, we're trying to look forwards and getting ourselves on our feet as businesses and getting back into the ring, albeit a very different looking ring. And we see ourselves as organisations who've, I suppose, in the last couple of weeks, who have paused projects, and we're seeing shoots beginning to come through, and definitely increased job numbers coming through June and July, another increase in July, and things beginning to pick up, and companies beginning to gain a little bit of confidence as we kick on with planned projects, which is fantastic to see. I suppose with that in mind, after the bumpy journey that we've all had, getting mentally fit, bringing strong energy levels to where they should be is more important now than ever, and could make all the difference for businesses as we emerge from the pandemic. Getting a workforce mentally fitter will support the workforce and organisations, not just to recover, but also to use their initiative to take the opportunities that inevitably will arise as we come out of this. Personally, for myself, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old at home, and I suppose myself and my wife have been working from home since March, and childcare is still not open on our side of things, especially for those particular ages. So we might get an interruption at any particular point, which has been the way for the last couple of months, and the same for many. And I suppose from my own point of view, there have been times where I felt a little bruised and battered mentally from the challenges. I suppose during lockdown, I started listening to podcasts myself when I was running the roads, trying to escape from the compound, as it felt a little bit at times, and get a little window to myself. And I suppose mainly a lot of them were sporting and leadership podcasts. And I suppose I've taken a huge amount from these myself. I do believe there is a strong, I suppose, a relation between teams and cultures. I do believe it's in relation to teams and cultures within organisations that we can learn a huge amount from high-performing elite sporting environments. And this is I suppose this is why I have been listening to a lot of those podcasts. But I suppose this leads me to why I was just absolutely thrilled that Cathal agreed to join us today. And I suppose that after chatting to Cathal and to the Chamber, that Cathal could add some real value to the members, really specifically at this juncture, this moment in time, and trying not to look backwards anymore, make plans for the future, and step out into it and get in a positive mindset. So no pressure at all there, Cathal. Just before we kick on, I suppose firstly just want to, I suppose Cathal has nominated two charities, which are the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland and the Irish Motor Neuron Disease Association. So we'll be making a donation to both on Cahill's behalf. So thanks again, Cathal, for that. Just a little bit about Cathal. So Cathal is a former professional rugby player with Munster Rugby until he was forced to retire early through injury in 2016. Since then, Cathal has been utilising his background in sports and performance psychology and has been working with Munster Rugby as mental skills coach from the academy, where he still works currently. In 2018, Cathal worked with the United States Army as a performance psychology trainer in West Point Military Academy. He then moved on to take up the role as head of program design with the employee engagement platform Pep Talk back here in Ireland. And his most recent appointment in the last couple of months has been for the director of rugby role within UL Bulls. So just to get you the very best of luck with that, Cathal. So as Caoimhe mentioned, please do feel free to send through questions through the chat, and I'll do my best to get through these at the end. As also these events, we would advise to take down 2 to 3 takeaways yourselves to implement to ensure you really do get the most out of the session. So that's it from my point of view. Thanks, Cathal, and you can take it away yourself from there.
Thanks a million, Rory. I'll start by sharing my screen, and probably my disclaimer, I don't have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old around. What I do have, if at some point it arises, is I have a dog. So if he barks at any point, you'll know there's someone approaching the house. It's a pleasure to be here, lads. So I really do appreciate the time afforded. And as Rory mentioned, just the two charities, just the Irish Motor Neuron Disease Association and the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland. Look, everybody has their own personal stories and their own personal charities, and these are just two that are pretty important to me. So if you do fancy making a donation, please do so as well. I'm going to do my best to be as succinct as possible for the next 15 to 20 minutes. A couple of videos throughout. What I will do, there'll be a couple of scattered references and maybe resources if people want to go and take a look. Rory mentioned some podcasts that he's been listening to at the start. There's a few books, even some corny movie references throughout maybe. So if you do want to take those down as you go, please do so. Right, so we're looking at resilience, what it is, and I suppose very importantly to start with that last line is that we can train it. Before we go any further, it is that's my name, but I already mentioned I put a slide up of my dog in every single presentation I do. I get a bit of a power trip whenever anyone asks me to do a presentation or a talk or a workshop. So I just put a picture of my dog into every single presentation. That's just my own process. To begin with, resilience, it is a word that has been thrown around an awful lot over the last, 4 months in particular. Everybody has been talking about, be resilient, these are times we just have to be resilient, but there is very little follow-up on that. It's going, what does be resilient mean? Oh, that's great, just go and be resilient. It's very important to realize that resilience and resilience training, it is dynamic, it is a process, it is contextual, and it's time dependent as well. So you can be resilient in some aspect of your life and you can be maybe not as resilient in others. So you might find yourself in a work context very, very resilient, and then some family situations you might tend to struggle. So this is not something that is linear. It is very much contextual, and it's important to realize that it is dynamic. Yes, it is about performance. That is a key bit. It's important for performance for teams, in order to be resilient, and to act in a resilient way. But it's also about well-being. There's a researcher by the name of Mustafa Sarkar. I'd recommend taking a look at some of his work, and he's one of the foremost authorities on resilience training. He's done a lot of work in elite sport, with the Olympics, with even some of the organizations, over here in Ireland. This guy is absolutely brilliant, and a lot of his research will find that yes, while it is about performance and we can improve in whatever endeavor we're doing, it's also about our well-being. So if we are able to handle a pressurized situation, and it's basically how well we can function when, put under pressure. And that's about our performance. How well is our performance? How good is our performance when we're under pressure? But also, what is our well-being like? How well are we taking care of ourselves when we're put in a pressurized situation? So it's not one or the other. These aren't independently exclusive. They can be tied to each other. It's also important to remember that this is a process. So I mentioned the environment there at the start. And as you notice down the bottom there, that seed growing into a tree, that doesn't just happen. So resilience doesn't just occur. It doesn't just occur for you as an individual. It is about the environment and the context that you're in as well. For anyone out there who is an employer, or a work colleague, or a father, or a mother, a parent, a brother, a sister, or even just any form of a support system or resource for someone else, the environment that you create for those people, for the people around you that are important, that is vital. That helps people to be resilient. There are other elements into it that we can work on, and we're going to touch on those shortly. But it's important to remember that this is a process. We can develop it, we can train it, and with the right interventions, we can train and develop it, and we can really grow with it. I'm going to introduce us just to one man to begin with. His name is Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was an Austrian man. He was a neurologist and psychiatrist. He was the author of the book Man's Search for Meaning, which I would highly recommend giving a look to. It's a bit of a tough read, but it's one, and when I say tough read, I mean it can be, some of the stuff that you're reading is tricky. It's difficult to take in because he deals a lot with the Holocaust from his perspective. He went through four different concentration camps. And I'm just going to give you just one of the quotes. This guy is referenced an awful lot in resilience training. So he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. I'm now going to introduce us to a man named Marcus Aurelius. And if you're anything like me, the second you hear that, you probably think of the movie Gladiator. I'm not necessarily referring to Marcus Aurelius from the Russell Crowe movie right now. I am referring to the Roman emperor. And this is a quote from probably the most powerful man on the planet 2,000 years ago. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. There's a fantastic book by a man named Ryan Holiday that I would highly recommend taking a look at as well. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. It's very easy read, some great little nuggets in there, and it deals a lot with Stoic philosophy and some of the great emperors such as Marcus Aurelius. I'm also going to go into the sporting field. I'm sure there's people out there who might have watched the documentary recently on Netflix, The Last Dance, all about Michael Jordan. It is absolutely fantastic. Even if you're not a basketball fan, I would highly recommend taking a look at it. And the likes of performers like Michael Jordan do get quoted a lot, but oftentimes the highest performers, success leaves clues somewhere, and you have to try and find those and try and take the bits that you like from it and see how you can apply that into your own life. And this was just a quote that for me, I find it particularly useful. I find it very practical. And look, it's just another excuse for me to reference Michael Jordan in a talk, so I quite enjoy that as well. I'm now going to show a very short video of another basketball player by the name of Kobe Bryant. Many of you might have heard him. Kobe tragically passed away at the start of this year, but the guy, when you watch all the tributes that poured in afterwards, you see the impact he had on so many people. But what was my feeling on him, what really separated him from others in particular, and why I enjoy this reference, is he had an uncanny ability to verbalize and articulate what he was thinking, and his process and his mentality to situations. So being able to do something and then being able to verbalize it are often two different things. This is going to be a short 2-minute video where Kobe is coming to the tail end of his career. He's in the middle of a pretty severe injury, and he's just on the back of another one. So I'm going to pass it over to Kobe now.
How hard is it dealing with injuries, though? These are things you don't know where they're coming from or whatever happens. It's all of a sudden, boom, an injury.
You control what you can control. I can't, the Achilles injury. I can't control that. I mean, I did everything humanly possible to be ready every single night. Something like that happens. It's out of your control. It is what it is.
How do you reset and rehabilitate yourself and come back? I mean, that's a serious injury. Yeah. And for a normal person, at that point, that's the end of it. Mm-hmm. It's like you're not going to go through the rehab. You're not going to do all that work to try to come back. What drives you to come back?
The process of it. I want to see if I can. I don't know if I can. I didn't know if I could come back from that. I wanted to find out. I want to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I always do. I just break everything down to its smallest form, smallest detail, and go after it.
So you never got in front of yourself?
Oh, of course I did. When I did, that's when I had those moments of self-doubt because you're thinking of the end goal, right? So I had to check myself and say, okay, focus on now. And that's a constant dance. It happens all the time. It happens for me now, right, with the shoulder and stuff. And being in the doctor's office and saying, hey, this is a 9-month process. And I just go, I just did this. Like, I just did this. 9 months. I just did 9 months. I got to do it again.
But you reset.
Yeah, it's just like, day by day, just one day at a time.
I quite enjoy that short little interview, and even just to listen to it again, I always think I take something different from it every time I watch it. And even that last bit, if I was to turn around and say to all of us right now that, these last 3-4 months, when we were in the pits of the lockdown, if someone turned around tomorrow or next week and said, we're restarting it, we have to do it all over again, what would our mentality be like right now? And it's a pretty difficult thing to have to look at. And he's speaking about a situation where he's just come off a 9-month injury and he's going back into another 9-month injury. And, I just think it's a good little test for ourselves and going, okay, how would we handle it if something was thrown at us? Because that brings me on to, I suppose, one of the other sporting crossovers here. One of the most difficult things for any athlete or any professional athlete, any elite athlete, is dealing with injury. It is, in a lot of sports, in particular contact sports, it is a predictable obstacle, but that doesn't really diminish the effect that it can have on your physical health, but also on your mental health and your relationships around. What it does is it can often make you question your identity. A lot of the athletes from research would really struggle with who they are when they're taken out of the game. It's the same when you're transitioning from one sport to another. It's the same as maybe when you're transitioning from out of university into the workplace. If you're transitioning from the workplace into retirement, those are very difficult transitions, and your identity gets questioned a lot. And in many ways right now, everybody is like an injured athlete. We all have to deal with massive uncertainty, this identity crisis of not knowing who we are. And it can be very, very challenging because we're not used to this. We're not used to everything that's going on. But thankfully, there are some practical ways that we can begin to work on it. It's not easy, but there are ways. You will have heard from pretty much all of those references we have above. Viktor Frankl, Marcus Aurelius, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and pretty much all of it was about the response in a situation, because it's one of the things that we can always control in any given situation. And it was another quote, I believe, from Frankl, is in any given situation, we can always control our response. That's always in our control. It doesn't mean we need to be happy about the situation, but how we choose to respond. That's there's great comfort in knowing that's always in your own hands. To go on a definition, which can sometimes be a little boring, but I think it's necessary to get a grasp of it. And this is one from the American Psychological Association. I'm going to fire through this relatively fast. It's a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant source of stress, family, relationship problems, health problems, workplace, and financial stressors. And when you just look at that slide and you look at all those things down there on the left, and you look at a significant source of stress and all of the areas that maybe Rory would have mentioned at the start of this session, is that the likelihood is we've all experienced some level of those. They've been around they might have been around beforehand. And there's an interesting piece of research that's done actually onto what makes the real elite of the elite. So super elite athletes. It was done in 2016 with some of the, I think it was the British Olympians and some, what made them super elite. One of the areas that made guys super elite was they had actually come through some level of adversity or trauma at some point. Now, again, you don't try to design this, you don't try to force this, but it's important to know that we can still grow and we can still develop in the face of all this. It's also important to know what resilience isn't. And it's not the absence of experiencing all these things. That's not what resilience is. We don't need to avoid all these. We don't need to be scared or frightened of them. They're predictable. And right now, when we look at all those, we're probably in the midst of it, and we're hoping that we're on the far side of it. Going to introduce you to another guy. His name's Jocko Willink, and aside from having one of the most stereotypical masculine names of all time, the guy's a former Navy SEAL. He won both the Silver and Bronze Stars, two incredibly high awards in the US military. He's the owner or the host of the Jocko podcast, which is a very creative name, as I'm sure you'll agree. He's the author of 2 books. Again, if you do want to take a look into them, I would really, really recommend them. They're called Extreme Ownership and Discipline Equals Freedom. And he's a bit of a nutcase. Jocko is a little bit of a nutcase. He's absolutely brilliant, and he's one of the most decorated Navy SEALs that has ever, as far as I know, has ever lived. And again, his ability to verbalize his experiences and the thought process and the mentality of a Navy SEAL, particularly in the Iraq War and following on from it, is very, very interesting. I'm going to put a short video of Jocko now, so you're going to have to please forgive the cringy rock music that goes in the background. There's no way for me to take it out, but there's a message in there with regarding our response and how we choose to respond to a situation that I think is going to be, it's one I try to apply, and I think it can be very, very beneficial when we look at actually building our resilience. And you'll see what I mean from this quote after the end of the video.
One of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on. And he'd say, "Boss, we got this and that and the other thing." And I'd look at him and I'd say, "Good." And finally, one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem. And he said, "I already know what you're going to say." I said, "Well, what am I going to say?" He said, "You're going to say good." He said, "That's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say good." And I said, "Well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's going to be some good that's going to come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on the other one. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted. Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. You learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have the opportunity to figure out a solution. That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out. Don't get startled. Don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well, then hell, you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
So you might get a little insight into why I call Jocko a little bit of a nutcase, because that's his manner is unique, to say the least. But you look at that, and there isn't one of us right now, I can't imagine there is anyway, there's not one person who's going, the COVID-19 situation is good. That's not what that's about. This isn't about just ignoring reality and just trying to be happy, positive all the time just for the sake of it. It's more about our approach when something does go wrong and how we have prepared ourselves. Another definition of resilience, if you want it, I think it came from the Harvard Business Review, is the ability, or the capacity, to prepare for change before it's necessary. So if we can be prepared for as many situations as possible and prepare how we want to respond and how we choose to respond, that is the good thing that we can take out of things. And I particularly like this Heaney quote, because there's an outside chance / very strong chance, realistically right now, is that if we summer this one out, we'll be able to winter, rather than if we winter this one out, we can summer. If we can get through these next few months, I think we look back on it in a very different light. So when we get down into it, how can we actually train our resilience then as well? There are some designed ways that research will back up that we can actually begin to train our resilience. As I mentioned, it is dynamic, it's a process, and the environmental factors are hugely important, but we can also do a lot of work on this ourselves. And the first place to start is by building our connections. And that's to do with your relationships. That's not just your romantic relationships, that's your friendship groups, your work colleagues, the people that you spend time with, the people maybe that you've been removed from over the last few months, your natural connections, your natural encounters. Sometimes they happen organically, and that's fantastic if they do, but if not, we need to put time into them. This one's an easy one to say, taking care of our well-being, take care of our mind and body. That can mean anything, that can mean a number of things, it can mean nothing. But to each individual, there's a good chance we have an idea of what is important to us about taking care of our well-being. Rory mentioned at the start, going for a run, getting outdoors. These things are relatively simple, but the simple things, and when you take a look at what has gone into the research around resilience, it is the simple things that can apply. Finding purpose. This one is a big one. This is like the bigger picture, the bigger vision stuff. Accepting change, accepting the situation. Again, it doesn't mean we need to be happy about having to wear a mask and not be able to hug each other, and not be able to give anyone a handshake. We have to be able to accept the situation that we're in and then still move forward, and find a way to picture that bigger vision and then put a plan in place. Then the last one is, where possible, trying to embrace healthy thoughts. And again, that is not ignoring reality. That is not just saying, isn't everything absolutely brilliant? Isn't it fantastic we can't go on holidays and we've all been forced to go on a staycation, even though, the west of Ireland doesn't have too many car parks for everybody to be going. And part of that is about acknowledging the present. So actually looking at the situation in the cold light of day and going, okay, where do we find ourselves? Where do we find ourselves right now? That could be in many aspects of your life. That can be in your financial aspect, in your relationship aspect, your family aspect, your friendship aspect, in your emotional, your psychological, your physical. Acknowledge the present, try to learn from the past, and then maintain that hopeful outlook. So 3 and 4 are kind of interconnected that way. And there are ways that we can train this. So I'm going to ask us, just for ourselves, we're not going to be shouting this out because it's not the forum to do that, but a couple of questions to ask yourself. And if we're doing these on a regular day-to-day basis, we're training and we're developing our own resilience. And how can I improve my relationships right now? And if that means reaching out to someone, making a call, sending an email, setting up another video call, which I'm sure everybody here is absolutely thrilled about being on another one. How do I do that? And how can I start right now? My well-being. How can I take care of my body and my mind right now at this moment? That could be individual to you. Maybe you're into meditation. Maybe you're into mindfulness practice. If you are, fantastic. Maybe that's not for you. Maybe you're into yoga. Maybe you hate that. Maybe you love lifting some tin in the gym. Whatever it is, what can you do for your body? What can you do for your mind? And your goals and purpose. And some of these, for most people, will have been removed and the rug could have got pulled from underneath you over the last while. The initial goal that you might have had for 2020, which has probably gone to pot right now. How do we reset that and aim at something else and then make a plan towards going after what you want to achieve? And this doesn't need to be 10 things all at once. It's just that one thing. And then the outlook. And this one's particularly important. And even just to take a couple of seconds for yourself for that first segment of the outlook. What am I grateful for? And even just to be thinking about that in your mind right now. I know there's a lot of noise around the practice of gratitude, and everybody just says, oh, just be happy and be grateful for what you have. And it's a nice sentiment, but there is a little bit of a deeper rooted meaning that goes with that. When we effectively practice gratitude, it can really boost our empathy. It can lower our aggression levels. It can build our connections, and it can really boost our outcomes. And it plays a huge role in developing and growing our resilience. And also looking at what is important in your life right now, what's really, really important. And again, the tough stuff, which is the real stuff as well. The likes of finances, those ones, they're real. They're not fake, and they're as important as anything else. But sometimes it's important to look at, okay, what is truly important in your life right now, and actually spending some time looking at that. And if we're doing these things on a daily basis, maybe not knowing so or subconsciously, we are beginning to develop that resilience. So again, how we can train it, it's very simple. These are the areas that I just want us to look at. So building our connections, just doing one thing to work on a relationship, and that can just be a friend that you haven't talked to in a long time, someone that maybe you used to be close to, now you're not anymore. Take care of your well-being. That's really, really important. Well-being is a fluffy word for some people, and it doesn't always mean, you're just eating fruit and you're doing yoga on the top of a mountain. Your well-being is everything. Your well-being is your physical well-being, your mental well-being, your financial well-being, your emotional well-being, your psychological well-being, and just doing one thing. So being selfish about it. Do one thing to take care of your body or your mind, or both, preferably. Those two are usually interconnected. And finding purpose and doing that one thing that gives you purpose in life, or is getting you towards your goals somehow. Again, that can be anything. It's just the smallest thing. And when we start to build these up over time, we are training our resilience. And that last one is where we try to embrace healthy thoughts. So practicing a bit of perspective. That one is interlinked with practicing gratitude. We get to actually take a bit of a zoom out, and we get to look at what actually is going on and what are the important things and the things that we're truly grateful for, rather. And just to finish with, before I pass us back over to Rory, and we can maybe get to some questions if people do have them. I understand it's a tricky environment to send in questions, but I'm more than happy to chat if people would like. Just the last bit before we get there. Just you may have heard the reference of, you put on your own oxygen mask first, and the other analogy that goes in the helping profession of, you can't pour from an empty cup, and they're all very, very true. And everything that would have been mentioned throughout this session would have been very much directed at you as an individual. And that was very targeted, because if you are interested in helping your employees, if you are a leader in an organization, if you are a parent looking to take care of your kids, if you're a friend who, sees yourself as a solid support resource, you have to be selfish first, and you have to take care of yourself first. If you don't do that, you will not be able to help others. And if by building your own resilience, you are more likely to be there for other people, you're more likely to be able to help them. As I said, if that's in your business and your organization side of things, in the workplace, if you're doing these things for yourself, you're more than likely going to be able to do them for others. So we'll finish with just check in with yourself, check in to see how you're doing those 4 things. And then the last one is just to reach out. If we've effectively checked in, please do reach out to other people. Just check in with them. I'd say it's maybe 30 times a day, we might get asked, how are you? And we all go, grand, yeah, fine, not too bad. Just reach out, ask the question of someone, and that's all you can do. And if you're doing that and you're taking care of yourself, we're slowly beginning to build our resilience. So that's it from my side, guys. I'm going to pass you back over to Rory. And yeah, basically that's, if there was one resounding thing I'd like to finish with is where possible, just be sound to yourself, and preferably to other people as well. If you have the option of being sound or not being sound, please choose the first one. So I'll pass you back over to Rory, and thanks for the time.
Thank you very much, Cathal, for that. I suppose I do have a question. I suppose you did mention the importance of relationships, and one of the key elements there, and touching base, I suppose, what kind of impact did that have on people once they went into isolation and lockdown? Was there a huge negative impact, you think, at that particular point on people's resilience?
So what's the question? Is
just, I suppose, the negative impact, huge negative impact on the isolation, I suppose, to a certain extent. And we still have a little bit of it. There's still people not being able to go for a pint or do whatever they want to do with friends. And there's obviously, there might be an overkill on some Zoom calls with friends, and now they've kind of died down a little bit now again. But yeah, that lack of, I suppose, touch points, the lack of, I suppose, engagement, the lack of, touch point with some relationships outside of family, I suppose, really, and what kind of impact that have had on people's mindset.
Yeah, look, that's one of the huge areas there, is that, and it's probably one of the areas that people are crying out for at the moment, is that human connection. You know, we're like, even if you're the most introverted of characters, you know, we're built for human connection, and it's something that's really, really important, just in our development and in our resilience. So I think when that gets removed from you, from that's been taken away from your day to day, you have to force it. You have to find other ways to do it, and that's been really challenging. As you said, you mentioned the Zoom fatigue. I think most people have had some form of that. You know, I think the house parties online began right at the start, and they then began to die down because people are realizing, okay, they're maybe not quite the same. But I think it's really important not to give up on stuff like that. You know, not to just go, okay, there's an effect. It's called the Stockdale paradox. There's about a guy who was Admiral Jim Stockdale. This guy was he served in the Vietnam War, I believe it was. And he came through a few different, he basically was tortured for years and years and years. And he was asked how he managed to get through and who were the people who gave up first. And one thing that he said was that the people who gave up first were actually the optimists. And he said it was a funny way to look at it, because he said they were constantly just they were thinking, okay, oh lads, we're going to be out in a week. You know, we're going to be out next month. And then the next month would come and they weren't out. And then they'd be saying, oh, we'll be out by Christmas. And then Christmas came and they weren't out. And then eventually that just broke them. That broke their mentality. And it just was like, oh, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. We're nearly there. And I think for us in the situation we're in right now, with the possibility of, you know, touch wood, it doesn't happen, but the possibility of some form of a second wave coming with on COVID-19, I think if we're constantly just thinking, oh, next week it'll be fine, or, you know, by the time we get to the winter, everything will be grand. If we're thinking that can potentially break us as well. So it's not about ignoring the reality. It's about going, okay, here's the situation we find ourselves in, and then trying to make the absolute best of that situation when we can. And, you know, if that means that we need to have a few more Zoom calls to stay connected with friends and keep those relationships up, well, then, you know, we do what we have to do and we control what we can.
Perfect. Just another question here from Carol. Just interested in how the COVID situation affected the high performance athletes, I suppose, from your own side of things, I suppose, and from a team perspective.
Yeah, it's very hard, very hard. So, you know, it was a funny one. Some guys, maybe I think some of the more senior guys were probably a little bit happy with the break on the body, on the physical side to it anyway. That, you know, it's almost like a sabbatical from one of the most rigorous contact sports there is. So that was probably, you know, in a weird way beneficial. It was also, for some of those guys as well, they might never have had an extended break with their family. If they've got young kids, you know, which quite a few of the senior players would have, that's almost been refreshing for those guys, because they haven't got that time around them for many years. Like, what you might get off is you might get a few weeks in the summer, and if you're like, those guys are getting picked on international tours or Lions tours, or they're heading away and they're not going to be there that often. So I think for that end it was probably weirdly refreshing. But I think on the whole, for all athletes, I say it's been very, very difficult. And there was actually only a bit of research came out, I think it was only this morning, from the International Olympic Council, and they basically said one of the biggest challenges, and it's unsurprising realistically, but one of the biggest challenges was on the mental health side for elite athletes. And again, that's been really challenging, because your identity has been kind of ripped away. Like, it's really challenging. You're gone from this team environment, and you're still doing all your training, so you're still out doing your fitness, you still got your weights probably around you, but you're removed from everybody else. and it's very, very unusual, and your goals change. Usually you're aiming towards a trophy, and that's just been held, or you're aiming towards a game and it's just been put on it's been put on hold for so long that that's been quite difficult to deal with. Some of the younger guys in the academy, the guys have just been waiting and dying to get back into the facility, and we need to be very, very careful about how we do that, and making sure that everything is being done really, really strictly, probably over the top strictly, but it needs to be done that way until we get back playing games. So that's been challenging for the lads. But again, I don't believe any more so than what most people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's been tough, and it's been crap in a lot of ways. But again, that's the situation we find ourselves in, and it's about really how we decide to respond to that, I think, you know.
Perfect. There was a HR question, I suppose a recruitment question from our own point of view, just for ourselves. That was just related to a lot of employees, should I say, look at the 3-day weeks now going forward, and some kind of refusing to go back to the offices, and how are companies managing that. I suppose from our own experience, it's still a little bit early to say on this side of it. First of all, from a HR perspective, it's not compulsory for people to have, to create a remote policy. If you want people in the office, and that was the original agreement that was there, that's something, it's your prerogative if you want to do that. Of course, abiding by all the instructions by government and so on, that's there. So it isn't compulsory. However, as we all know, skill shortages, you don't want to lose good people. The environment is changing. Productivity from remote working, as we've almost said, a lot of people have proved recently, is very high. So are equally high in a large percentage of cases, a large percentage of companies. So it is advisable to probably look at it where possible. But every role is different, of course, like in a manufacturing environment where people would be, have to be on site, and to office environments, and some you have a split. Some people may have to come in, some may not. I suppose the key to that negotiation, from our own point of view, we have seen clients beginning to look at it, and even internally from ourselves, we're looking at ourselves. But the key to that, I think, is be very, I suppose, communication is key as to why you're making the decisions. Really be open and have real clarity in your methods and your communication as to why specific individual roles are, need to come into the office, and a lot of them are self-explanatory. And then why certain roles will be potentially remote working longer term. But there's no doubt about it, employees are keen to have it here to stay, and we are finding a large percentage of employers, I suppose, have kind of surprised themselves that they're almost got to a point now where they're quite comfortable with it, remote working at this particular point. But yeah, I would see, I suppose, even from our own point of view, longer term, probably looking at a 2 to 3 day week for a lot of companies where possible. But communication is clear, because any question marks on that, it can be seen as a lack of trust. So communication as to why you're doing each individual role rather than an employee, that's critical. You're making a role, a role is available to be remote, not an employee, and there is a difference. We've just got one more question here, guys. So what advice would Cathal have in regard to building personal resilience? I suppose during those lulls when anxiety or defeatist nature can take hold. I suppose Kobe struggled with the shoulder injury, how to build resilience again or persevere on the personal side.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think on the personal side to it as well is that, so if we go back right to the beginning, so is that the environment is hugely important, first off, but then you can also bring, it's almost like a funnel. So the environment plus your personal characteristics plus maybe your background and your history and your past, plus the situation that you find yourself in, they're almost all like a funnel, and you're trying to combine them all into and getting the best possible outcomes you can. I think for the personal side to it, I don't want to just throw out a statement or an answer for the sake of it. I would go back to probably acknowledging as much as you can, and acknowledging the reality of a situation is pretty important as well. And then it's an overused line, but the reason it's overused and the reason it's a cliche is because it's true, and it helps in performance. It also helps in well-being. But if you go back to, and Kobe was referenced there, he finishes with, you control what you can control. And there's absolutely myriad of things right now that we have no control over, probably more so than we've ever had a lack of control, which is really, really tough. But at the same time, what can you control on a day-to-day basis? What are the things that are in your hands? Let's say you mentioned remote work in there, Rory. So let's say your boss or your company or your organization decides not to go ahead with remote work, and you find that a challenge. There might be some aspects to that you can control, and there might be others that you can't, and we need to accept and move on and try and go, okay, what can I control today? And I think when we look at our personal side of things, being as selfish as you can, and I mean that in the best way possible, being as selfish as you can about your own well-being, that is the best way you can help anyone else. So like, if you are, again, I would recommend being curious on that aspect. Look into things that you might find interesting, the likes of meditation. You're mentioning podcasts, Rory. I'm sure you're going to have some good ones to suggest to people as well. But anything along those lines that keeps the brain ticking, keeps the body moving, all of that is going to be very good. And the last thing I would mention as well, just coming out of UL, there's been some recent funding for a lot of green exercise and research, a project called Go Green X, and there's huge amounts of work and research being put into the beneficial mental health benefits for getting outdoors and actually exercising outdoors and moving outdoors. And that doesn't need to be going for an Ironman or running a marathon. It can be just getting moving and getting into some nature spaces, which fortunately enough in Limerick we've got some fantastic ones. So I just wanted to mention that in there at the end as well.
Perfect. I have one last question for you, Carl. If I don't have something in my diary, it won't happen. And so I'm going to leave today's call and I'm going to put into my diary, sit down and review for a couple of minutes, just have take a little time for myself, resilience, well-being, purpose and outlook. And from a practical step, for somebody like myself, how often would you say, would it be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, to sit back and throw it into my outlook now?
I would be saying to completely sit on the fence as often as you can. You're trying to just, like, what you want to get to a point is where those things are happening relatively organically, and probably a lot of them are, and it's great to be putting them into the diary. And we used to have a thing actually with Pep Talk, and it was something we stole from another guy. When I say steal, I mean borrowed indefinitely. But the idea of taking 5 minutes out of your day just once a week to do a favor for someone else. We call it a 5-minute favor. And I think it was from a guy named Adam Rifkin. If anybody does want to look him up, it was something. He was a very, very successful entrepreneur. He took 5 minutes out of his day every single day to do favors for other people, because he knew he could have a massive impact on their lives by taking 5 minutes out of his day. So just by doing that, take 5 minutes out of your day to just check in with yourself and just to reach out to others. And there's an adage that's used in a lot of mindfulness meditation practice that people talk about, if they can't find 10 minutes in the day to meditate. And I think it's the same when we're dealing with our well-being. If we can't find 5 minutes out of the day or 10 minutes out of the day to do that, that means we probably need to give it 20. Because there's probably there's stressful situations, or there's enough going on externally that is putting pressure on you to feel as if you don't have that time. So I would say, where possible, you're trying to do it daily, but you need to be realistic about it as well. Life goes on. Your 4-year-old and 6-year-old could run into that room right now and start tearing the place asunder. So you need to be realistic about the situation you're in as well. And the last thing I would mention on that is not to be going into all or nothing thinking, to be thinking, okay, I haven't done this now for a week, so I'll just give up on it. Going, okay, well, you can do it again tomorrow. You can do it right now. And that can just be one phone call to a mate. That can just be one of those things. Just taking a little bit of time. Doesn't need to be perfect every single day. None of us are. But I think giving it a go and resetting is very important in that building resilience capacity.
Perfect. I think that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you very much for jumping in, and thanks a million, Carl. That was absolutely fantastic. Really, really appreciated that now. And of course, thank you to the Chamber and to Quiva for organising everything. And I hope you enjoyed. It's going to be sent out, guys, from the Chamber. We'll also send the links for the 2 charities on the Chamber if anyone wants to make a small donation on those. Quiva's going to send those out as well. And we hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks a lot, folks.
Thanks, Millie, guys.